So I'm going to talk a little bit about IP. I'm an art director and I'm an industrial designer by trade, but I'm going to talk a little bit about branding and IP because this is something that I work with every day. So I am a very proud alumni from the ArtCenter. As an industrial designer, I went to work designing my real passion, which is motorcycles. And I did that for 3 years at Honda and learned a lot about that particular IP. I then moved on to Disney, where I learned pretty much everything I know from Mr. Tim Delaney, who I worked with when I was first there. I spent about 8 years learning about technology and applying that to new product development. And utilizing IPs and brands and figuring out how we could distribute those stories in different ways. Then decided to change jobs completely and had a passion about education and wanted to develop a new business around e-learning that was very rewarding, if not completely successful. And then decided to learn something new that I knew nothing about, which was gaming. And I spent 5 years designing mobile games and console games and PC games at Disney Interactive. And then most recently, I've moved over to live entertainment, where the world is completely different, but the principles remain the same, and they have been throughout all of the different things I've done. So what I'm going to do is talk about a few rules that we've all learned moving along through our careers. The one that has always kind of stayed with me is really asking yourself, what's the big idea? Why do I really care? What's the story in here? Where's the heart? I'm going to use a few examples to illustrate, one about how a big idea can work not only locally, but can work globally. And the three IPs I'm going to use, thankfully, have played incredibly well here in China. So Jurassic World is 25 years old and wasn't introduced to China in the beginning, but as you can see here, we had our best opening. You guys opened about a week ago. We only opened in America today, which is very interesting that we have decided to open the most important movie in all of our catalog, open it in China before we did in the United States. And I think it talks a lot about the breadth of that brand. This is also another IP that's been really successful for us. It has done just phenomenally well, and it started out as a very simple idea. It was a little story that someone wrote based off an article they had read about drag racing in LA. So just something they read in the paper, turned it into a pitch, and has become this wonderful history of movies that has done remarkably well here in China. We frankly were thrilled, but also surprised at how strong this particular IP has been worldwide, which at its core would seem like it's a very American brand and American-centric, but it's really played well. And the last one may be my favorite one. I spend most of my day job working with Illumination on Despicable Me and Minions. So now here's a really interesting, so this studio is it's literally only about 8 years old. And yet it's had the highest grossing animated franchise ever. And we are against some incredibly stiff competition. But there is something about Despicable Me, the characters and the minions, that play incredibly well all around the world. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. You'll hear in Hollywood, we always talk about quadrants, and is it a 4-quad movie? Well, the goal is if you can have a 4-quadrant movie, obviously it's going to appeal to more people. The 3 properties that I've just shown you work pretty well in these 4 quadrants, and I think that that is one of the keys to a successful IP, is designing it in a way, creating stories, creating characters that really have appeal from kids, male, female, and adults, male and female. And there's something in it for everyone. Some of our Universal movies are very, very niche, but these particular ones that I'm talking about are a very broad appeal. You may ask yourself, well, why is a movie about dinosaurs, why is that successful at all? There's been tons of them over the years. But there are some interesting sort of tenets or interesting sort of brand guidelines that we use that we feel continue to make this franchise very successful and popular to our audiences. And one of them is always having something that deals with the wonder of the world, the wonder of dinosaurs, and the thrills that happen in these movies. And you'll see that that is sort of a consistent thing through the Jurassic series, is always having this sense of awe and wonder and incredibly thrilling moments. Having big-ass T-Rexes really helps as well. And of course, vehicles like the gyrosphere, those add a lot of thrill and a lot of action. But maybe what is most unique about Jurassic is having the human and dinosaur relationship, Owen and Blue. That is really something special that if you've seen all of the movies, you've seen that relationship grow and evolve. And it's something that we attach ourselves to, and we deepen our appreciation, deepen our love of those characters through that relationship that always builds. And part of that is actually having dinosaurs that are ownable. And this is something we struggle with a lot, because anyone can make a dinosaur movie or a dinosaur game or a dinosaur theme park or a dinosaur restaurant, doesn't matter. But only Jurassic actually has brandable characters. No other studio has a dinosaur that's called Blue and that has this relationship with the main lead. And something else that we put in there is what we think is believable science. So, there is science fiction and there is real science, but what we try and do is find a science that is plausible. So actually, the whole movie, the whole franchise was based on the plausibility of extracting DNA from a fossil. And if you can believe that, then it allows you to do an awful lot with your story. And of course, as I said, kind of having this shared world. We all have grown up going to museums, seeing fossils and seeing bones of dinosaurs. But Jurassic is really something, and maybe the only property that brings those dinosaurs into our world and have this sort of shared experience that I think makes it unique and makes it different. But more importantly, it allows us to imagine ourselves being in that world. And I think that that's really key, is creating moments and movies and environments where you believe you can actually be there. And that becomes a little bit more endearing. And if we talk about Fast and Furious, the Dodge Charger, Roots supercharger, that becomes this iconic piece in the movie that is very consistent with the storyline. It goes through all of the stories and all of the franchises, but it kind of represents this brand. It kind of allows us to have a little bit of nostalgia. And Detroit Muscle is really personified through Dom. So if you ask him, what his favorite kind of car is, and he drives a lot in the series, but he always says the Charger. It's got to be the Charger. And having that supercharger, coming out through the hood is really his signature. And something that the movie does is that it actually associates the character, the human character, with a vehicle. And so vehicles actually become characters in these movies. That is kind of another thing that I think has made the movie so accessible to people, because we all have some sort of a personal relationship with the kind of vehicle. And for Fast and Furious, this was really, really kind of solidified and established the yin and the yang, where we had Dom and Brian. And Dom is the older guy. He likes old-fashioned technology. He likes American muscle. And then Brian, who was young, and he loved the technology and the things that you could do, the tuning you could do on the import cars. And the whole movie is really about that relationship between these two characters with different points of view, but share the same goal of being the first person through the end of that quarter mile. And so it's a very simple story and a very simple setup of the characters, but it's turned out to be something that really resonates with people and has lasted for so long. The other thing that Fast and Furious does really well is it's pretty epic. And every single movie comes up with more and more sort of epic stunts. There's something that is very universal about action. And action translates in pretty much any language. And I think that that's another reason why this property has done so well worldwide. And so you also have these great stunts, but you've got these great action sequences, you've got these great car chases. And again, this is one of those things that is very universal. Every culture, I think, understands the thrill and the excitement and the tension that these kinds of action movies can capture, and these kind of crazy situations that we all sort of wonder, if I was in that position, what would I do? And again, talk about the car. So in Fate of the Furious, they took a look at the Charger and created the Ice Charger, which was a new vehicle that has this jet engine on the back that is critical in the movie, but it is just this epic vehicle that has become very, very popular and cherished by the fans sort of worldwide. And of course, in the car chases or the struggles that you see, the different kind of moments that the movie puts you in, all of these things are quite easily understood. But there's something about the way that Fast and Furious does it with the cars, and with the cars really being the characters. And if you know this particular movie and this scene, this is really where all of Dom's family are kind of fighting against him, really because they care and they're trying to save him. But it's, it's almost as if the people are holding and capturing him, but really the cars are personifying them. And of course, you can't have an action movie unless you are really blowing up a whole bunch of shit and having a huge set pieces that come to life. And it's kind of interesting that over all of the movies, they started out by being, all of the stunts were driven, and they're all very real. And it's also kind of interesting, this graph just shows in dollars how the damage has gone up, car damage in different movies. So I wonder if dollars of damage equates with a box office success. So I'll let you decide if that's the case or not. So be consistent. That's really a tenet when you have a franchise, because you can't keep reinventing it and changing it along the way. When you establish a franchise early on, you need to stick with what has worked well, stick with the success, and build on that and evolve it. And throughout each of these different movies and the different iterations, there have been some things that have remained consistent to all of them. And I think that's why fans have been able to go back and return to the theater and continue to enjoy them, because the storylines and the tenets and the basic goals of these movies remain the same. And part of these brand attributes really, you wouldn't think about it first, but really family is a very strong theme. And I'll talk a little bit about that in this. But of course, action. You always think about Fast and Furious, you think about action. You may think about the characters too. There's a lot of, Dwayne is doing incredibly well in so many movies, so he's a huge addition to the Fast team. But something you may not think about is sort of diversity in both male and female in the cast. So you'd be very surprised. It's very, very even in terms of how many men and how many women are sort of featured in it, but also in the box office. More surprisingly, it's a very balanced movie. The same number of girls go watch it as guys do, and I'll let the women in the room speculate why that is, but I think I have an idea. But it's interesting also that the diversity we think is something that has made this so appealing to so many different audiences around the world, is that the movies are very ethnically diverse. And the cast represents people from all different lifestyles, different backgrounds, different ethnic origins. And as I mentioned also, not only diversity of the cast, but diversity of the cars, because all of us have our favorite kinds of vehicles. And so the movie has, over time, kind of widened up the appeal of all of the different vehicles that they have. So, you may love European exotics, or you may love American classics, or you may love Asian sort of domestic tuner cars. There's something in there for everyone. I talked a little bit about family, and Dom's famous line is, I don't have friends, I have family. That has resonated with people, with the audiences and people that go to the movie, because even though these guys are kind of on the edge of the law, and in fact some of them go from the law to the other side of the law, really there is this such strong bond about the family. The movies are all about, you look after your family. And that clearly is a very international and sort of global theme, and is strangely one of the strongest underlying, I would say, storylines that we have in all of the Fast movies. And another thing that has helped made this brand so appealing in so many different markets is that the movies take you all over the world. And not many of us have had the opportunity to go to Cuba and see street racing on the streets of Havana. But in the Fast movies, you can be there and you can experience that. Or you can be, in Russia, like in 7 we saw earlier. And sort of real believable action in these different locations. And of course, you need to have lots and lots of toys. The more toys you have, the better. By the way, this works really well for consumer products, which is the division that I'm in. Having all of these toys obviously translates into a lot of different opportunities for product. So shifting gear a little bit to, I've heard a lot about being relevant or being relatable, and that's a theme that a lot of us seem to be moving towards, because it's really critical for the success of anything, and you have to care about it at some sort of a level. And with Despicable Me, it's had 5 of the biggest box office animated features anywhere in the world. It's such a new studio. So you ask yourself, well, can only old studios create great IP? And the answer is no. If you think about Illumination, they've been able to do it really, really quickly without a lot of history. The reason why I think they've been able to do this is that they really have a very sort of strong rooted belief in joy, the joy and discovery of each of the characters as being really, really key. And humor, and I think in one of the panels they said, humor, maybe that's not translatable. I could take exception to that, because I think that humor is international, is everyone has a certain kind of humor. And I think that with the Minions, they found a way that they can be humorous, because it's really they're sweet and they're subversive and they're kind of naughty, but they're really nice. They also, incidentally, don't have a language that anyone understands. So it is very translatable, but they're they're lovable characters and they're bloody funny. And so I think that there are ways you can make IP that will play humorously anywhere in the world. So, these aren't perfect characters. They're flawed characters. They're relatable. We're all flawed. We can all imagine ourselves in their shoes. They are that sweet and subversive. We have sort of this all-audience appeal. And then the other kind of ingredient that you need is, throw in some heroes. Throw in some badass heroes. If you've got great characters and you've got great scripts and great stories and all of the other things we've talked about, that seems to be a recipe that's fairly well established for success. These heroes can come in many different forms. They can be real people or they can be dinos, but if they're heroes that we can relate to and we can fall in love with, then we're going to care. And you think about, the heroes in Despicable Me. He was this bad guy, and Minions, all they are designed to do is to follow a bad guy, and yet Gru somehow fell in love with these three little girls and became a father. And so his story arc, changed completely, and all of a sudden now we can become part of his family, and we can follow sort of the journey that he went through from being this bad guy to being this super lovable dad, an imperfect dad, but aren't we all? And of course, these naughty but nice minions that you can't help but to love, and you can't help but to be amused by them, and help this IP be unique compared to any other. And finally, in my last sort of minute here, the idea is to really find a way that when you establish an IP, when you establish a brand and these characters, find a way for your fans to always be connected. The more you can be connected, the more you can be reminded of this, the more you're going to love it and continue to be invested in it. On Jurassic, you've got the great films, but then, you've got the home entertainment window where we can actually take it home with us. You've got bridge content that you can make on, let's say, on Netflix, which is where our Lego stuff is. Games, Jurassic Alive, which is an AR game, or our World Builder game. We have live events. So this is a touring show that can bring dinosaurs and those stories into your town without having to go to one of the theme parks. Or it may be publishing, and those could be books for the youngest audience or even contemporary ones. And all of the different fan engagement activities that we can have, because people love to role model and reenact, and the things that we have in parks and resorts, and digital content that is always on and having that 365 appeal and connection. So thank you very much. I hope to meet many of you after this, and talk to you soon. 谢谢.
Thank you.